Metal is a lot of things. It's a lifestyle, it's an attitude, a culture, a global movement. But the one thing that it's not is a musical style. And I can prove it.
Where am I?
What are you doing here? This is the end of the video. You're not supposed to be here yet.
Is that a tofu pizza?
You're supposed to be watching the unboxing part of the video, so get back there.
Oh, hello.
So then, what is it that actually makes a piece of music metal? In order to answer that, we're gonna need to take a look at a few different examples. First up, we've got Blind Guardian's Mirror Mirror. It's got powerful, melodic, very operatic vocals. It's at a high tempo. There are really fast, punchy drums with a lot of double bass. It has like a conventional sort of folky kind of harmony, fantasy-based lyrical themes. It's very catchy songwriting, but it's also really heavy on the storytelling. And they're demonstrating a very high level of technical ability. Then we've got 1349's I Am Abomination. It's got very unconventional chromatic harmony, heavy on the dissonance. There's basically no melody. It's at a very high tempo once again with insanely fast blast beats on the drums, almost constant tremolo picking on the guitar, very grim, harsh vocal style, occult, misanthropic lyrical themes with a very low emphasis on story, but they're also demonstrating an extremely high level of technical ability. And then we've got Sleep, Dope Smoker. It's very slow, has a blues-based harmony. Melodically, it's very simple. The vocal is like a gritty rock style with weed-based lyrical content. And they're demonstrating what I would call a pretty low level of technical ability. I could go on, but you get the idea. These are three bands that are undeniably metal, but share almost nothing musical in common at all. This leads me to a somewhat horrifying revelation. There is not even one single unifying musical characteristic that's shared by every metal song, or even most metal songs. And yet, you know it when you hear it.
You know.
So I ask again, what actually makes something metal? You're not gonna like it. I'll break it to you real easy. I was a vegetarian for many years, and I developed a love of tofu. Tofu doesn't really taste like much on its own. It's sort of a protein-packed little sponge that just takes on the flavor of whatever you add to it. And that is what metal is. Metal is tofu. Feels like you still don't quite believe me. That's fine. I'm not even close to done yet.
Oh yeah, hey, what's up, bro?
What are you doing back here?
I know what the tofu pizza is all about.
No, you're not ready. Did you get to the part about jazz yet?
Jazz? What? No.
Go! Jazz, on the other hand, is not tofu. Jazz has unique, instantly identifiable, unifying musical characteristics that remain recognizable no matter the aesthetic context. Now you're gonna see why I brought out these fun toys today. This right here is the Game Changer Audio Motor Synth Mark II. It's an analog instrument that uses mechanical motors to generate tones. And then this is a Strandberg Guitars Connor Kaminsky Artist Edition Salin guitar with bare knuckle juggernaut pickups. I can play a jazz tune on these instruments with any arrangement and any aesthetic that I like, and you will still hear jazz. Is always jazz, even when it's metal or EDM or reggaeton or drum and bass. There are unifying musical characteristics that transcend the aesthetic. Jazz harmony consists of extended chords, lots of 2-5-1 progressions and variations. The melodies are very chromatic and syncopated, and they highlight the chord changes of the song. It doesn't have to have a saxophone to be jazz. I have personally witnessed jazz performed on a saw, the musical saw. I'm scarred for life. This is also true of the blues, Baroque music, bossa nova, even country. They all have consistent musical tonality that is far more definitive than their aesthetic. Great pieces of music are timeless, and they exist outside of the aesthetic context in which they are presented. For example, Bach's Flute Sonata in B minor doesn't lose its identity if it's not played on a flute. Playing it on a guitar and the motor synth is not a musical characteristic. It's not pitch or rhythm or harmony. It's simply an aesthetic choice. It's basically sound design. That's the tofu that we're adding the flavoring to. In this case, we're making Bach-flavored tofu. Obviously, it would sound more authentic to perform it on the instruments that it was composed for, but that doesn't change the core composition, the music itself. Are you getting it yet? Maybe it will become more clear if we get away from the city and camp out under the stars. Much better, right? There's this idea in songwriting called the campfire test. It's the idea that if a song is truly great, you can strum some chords and sing it badly and drunk with your friends like you would around a campfire, and it will still hold up. I don't think it's a definitive test for the greatness of a song by any means, but it does illustrate my point very well. There are plenty of exceptions, but for the most part, most metal doesn't pass the campfire test. That doesn't mean it isn't great. I think the Black Dahlia Murder is truly great music, but it absolutely does not translate the same way as Wonderwall. And that's the reason that there are so many metal covers of pop songs and almost no pop covers of metal songs, because nobody's making tofu-flavored candy. It's also why we have these things that people call subgenres of metal, which actually proves my point almost too well. Subgenre names are always like folk metal, symphonic metal, melodic death metal. That's not a subgenre. It's just adding an actual musical style to the sound of metal. It's the flavor to the tofu. Or even worse, it just further describes the aesthetic, like pirate metal or stoner metal. We kinda have to have these subgenres because just calling it metal doesn't actually say almost anything about it. The prefix tells you more about what you're gonna hear musically than the metal part. The metal part tells you something else. Have you figured out what it is yet? Not to get all Sherlock Holmes on you, but once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. If we strip away everything from metal that isn't a unifying musical characteristic, what are we left with? Say it with me. Metal is sound design. It's production. Guitar, bass, drums, vocals. No, wait. Heavy guitar, heavy bass, punchy and active drums, powerful vocals. You can play any musical style with this aesthetic, and it will sound like metal. Recreating the metal aesthetic and sound design is actually pretty easy. These days, you can pretty much buy the sound. For example, today I'm using Spectre Digital Extinction Level Event drums and their Singularity bass instrument and Neural DSP Gojira X. If we take away all the flavoring, all the spice, and have just the tofu, we get this. I'm literally playing one note. It's nothing but pure rhythm and sound design. And it should suck, right? But it kind of doesn't. It's not gonna go on anybody's business time playlist, if you know what I mean, anytime soon. But this is what metal sounds like without the music part. And it's actually like a pretty tasty tofu. Here's the same thing without the metal production. I realize this may come as a shock to you, okay? I want you to keep in mind that this isn't exclusively a metal characteristic. There are plenty of things that we think of as musical styles that are really just a collection of sound design, instrument combinations, and production styles. But here's the thing. I don't see this as a weakness at all. I think this kind of flexibility is one of metal's greatest strengths. It's why it's a global phenomenon that isn't limited to being just some kind of regional flavor. It's why there are Indian metal bands that sound like India and Greek metal bands that sound Greek. There's awesome metal all over the world with people adding their own crazy new spin on it every day, and it's not limited by almost anything. The unifying factor of metal is that it's awesome. The sound that we've been talking about is an incredibly powerful, addictive thing that unites people across borders and races and political ideologies. Every year, I go on a metal cruise called 70,000 Tons of Metal. It's 3,000 metalheads from 70 countries, and the only thing that we have in common, the sole unifying factor, is metal. There are musical things that you can't do in the blues, or it becomes not bluesy anymore. But there's no chord progression, melody, or rhythm that you can play to make something that's metal not metal. To me, all this means is more possibility. For exploration and experimentation, any sound can be given a fresh new life in metal. It's possible that pizza is a slightly better metaphor than tofu, right? Pizza is dough, sauce, cheese. But wherever you go, people have put their own stamp on pizza. New York City has the slice of life, Chicago has deep dish, Sweden has kebab pizza, and it's so good. And then Detroit and Windsor area has this like square abomination, whatever. People will argue till they are blue in the face about which one's the best. But the actual truth is that even shitty pizza is better than most things in this world. And pizza is a template that gets not just a regional flair, but an individual flair when you decide the toppings that you want to put on it. Metal is pizza. And pizza is good. All right, you finally made it.
It was quite the journey.
Now you understand why I'm sitting here with a tofu pizza. It's because style and aesthetics are incredibly important. We're all working with the same 12 notes, and although you can still find some really unique combinations and fresh rhythms and all kinds of stuff, it's still a pretty limited palette. How you play your songs, the sounds you choose, and what your lyrics are about still matter. But the core of a song isn't what instrument you play it on, or whether or not your guitar tone slaps, or if your drums are real or a plugin. It's about telling a story that matters, moving people with the drama of chords and melodies and rhythms and riffs, and making artistic statements that resonate. So when you go to write your next metal song, ask yourself this: are you writing a great, timeless song that your grandkids will sing around the campfire? Or are you just making tofu pizza?